Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and the review you all have been waiting for. Yes, this is the last of my top 10 most anticipated movies of the year that came out this year, which I still had to see. And of course, we are talking about Wicked for Good, the follow-up to last year's monumentally successful Wicked, directed by Jon M. Once again starring Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, Jonathan Bailey, Ethan Slater, Bowen Yang, Marissa Bodie, Michelle Yeoh, and Jeff Goldblum. And of course, this picks up shortly where the first one left off. Of course, Elphaba is now seen as the Wicked Witch. And here comes Glinda trying to deal with the fact that she knows what actually is going on behind the scenes, but also is thrust in this position of power by the wizard and Miss Marvel to kind of appeal to the people of Oz as Glinda the Good, and all the conflicts that come with that and everything else in between. Of course, this was one of the most hotly anticipated movies of the year for many of people, just because this was such a long-awaited stage adaptation, and the fact we had to wait an entire year to get the second part. Now, there is definitely a cohesiveness in the fact that they were shot at the same time, and I do think that you feel that in some ways, but often the Act 2 of Wicked is considered to be greatly inferior to the first act. You know, of course, you have defying gravity to cap things off in that one. And I don't even know if any moment here quite captures the highs of that specific moment. But what I will say, because of course this has gotten a lot of mixed reception, and there are things about this movie that I am quite mixed on myself, but I think where this movie really shines is the emotional heights that they take this story, which I think far outshines the level of emotion that was present in the first one, because we've had the time to build up to these moments and these character arcs, even if, you know, some of them, we'll get into it. But yeah, I think this really does deliver on the promise of being a final chapter, even if everything doesn't fully come together, because as there are many amazing moments in this movie, there are some very questionable ones as well. But let's get into the positives here. Of course, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande as Elphaba and Glinda, respectively, are absolutely terrific. And I think Cynthia's obviously predictably as great as you would expect her to be. But Ariana really had a lot to carry on her shoulders in this movie. Considering Glinda's arc, there's a lot more emotional resonance and conflict with her character and where her arc eventually leads, and I think she carried it beautifully. I mean, there are a couple moments in this movie that are some of the finest moments of acting from any actor in anything, and I think just what she is able to carry on her face and her eyes alone is really impressive, even though I feel sometimes her eyes kind of stay at like this one level. And you look at someone like Cynthia Erivo, who I think is able to communicate a lot more with just a glance than Grande does. But I think for what she was given, I think Grande was the perfect choice to play this character, and I think probably overall the standout when it comes to her absolute best moments. But the scenes when they're together, I mean, my goodness, that's like the best stuff in the entire film. I mean, I might as well get into it. That title number in this movie, I was fighting back the tears. I mean, it wasn't like I was sobbing or anything, but it is just so well built. The dynamic and relationship between Elphaba and Glinda, and these two women just portray it so beautifully and so resonantly, and it's just absolutely incredible. And you see their friendship kind of shine through this dynamic that they have in this movie, and I think really that is the highlight of the film. And of course, you bring back those like Jonathan Bailey, who gets a lot less due in this movie, but still really effective for what he does. Jeff Goldblum, I thought, was a standout as the Wizard of Oz. As it goes along, I really was loving his performance because you kind of get a sense of what he was doing in the first one now, even though, you know, the Jeff Goldblum-isms and all. But I do think that this story takes the wizard to some very emotionally complicated places that I wasn't expecting, and I think the way in which he portrays the wizard was also very unexpected from what I kind of thought the story was going to play out like. But Jeff Goldblum, you know, he's in a lot of movies for a reason, and I'm really happy with his casting as the Wizard of Oz. And so then you get into the rest of the cast, and I think Ethan Slater gets a little bit more to do, but even then I feel like his character is a bit short-shifted narrative-wise. And you could say the same thing for some other actors in this movie, like Marissa Bode, which I don't want to even get into spoilers, because there's some crazy stuff when it comes to the character arcs in this movie that just feel so rushed, out of nowhere, forced, and I don't think the narrative gives that enough time to breathe, which is strange because they expand on Act 2, but a lot of times it doesn't feel like they expand on it in the proper ways that they should have. And that is probably my biggest issue with this movie, even though it does, you know, come together in a lot of ways and delivers the big emotional moments more than the first. I think that the story-wise, it leaves a lot to be desired, because my thing with this film, it's shorter than the first, and I'm not saying that it drags, but it definitely has its pacing issues when it comes to focusing on certain aspects of the story which maybe should not have been focused on, as opposed to other parts and elements of the story that feel choppy or incomplete, which is really a bummer because I think they really could have shifted their focus to other parts of the narrative that would have made it a whole lot stronger. And I honestly think that, as contradictory as this sounds, I think that this movie could have been like 15 minutes longer. I mean, it's still nowhere, well, it would be closer to the running time of the original film, but I do think that it would have felt more fleshed out. And I think one of the biggest issues that people have been raising with this movie, and this isn't necessarily a spoiler by any means, but the inclusion of Wizard of Oz, of course, is a massive part of the story of Act 2, but I feel this movie relies way too heavily on the audience's knowledge of the Wizard of Oz. Now, granted, most people who are seeing Wicked have seen the Wizard of Oz, have grown up on it, but I know some kids are a little uncultured these days and they haven't seen the Wizard of Oz. Do better, parents. But if that's the case, you have these kids coming to see this movie without any knowledge of the original story. And it feels like when it hits these beats, it kind of makes the audience assume that they're going to fill in the gaps. And I don't think that's necessarily right, because it ultimately makes the story of Wicked for Good feel more choppier than it would have otherwise if it wasn't including all the tie-ins to the Wizard of Oz. So I think that's probably the biggest narrative shortcomings that this movie has: rushed character arcs and those elements coming together. And that's why I go back to see this again, I might lower my score that I'm going to give it. And also another fact of the matter, I have to mention it, and I love her, but I really don't know what she was doing here. But I think Michelle Yeoh is extremely miscast in this film. I really could not get behind any of her line delivery at all. I didn't know what she was doing. And she becomes more cartoonish than a lot of this larger-than-life elements that are happening in the story, and every time she was on screen I just was so baffled. I mean, I loved her in Everything Everywhere All at Once. She's terrific in that film, won the Oscar, and you completely understand when watching that movie how great of an actress Michelle Yeoh is. And I mean, look, she was in Crazy Rich Asians with Jon M, so you would think that, you know, this performance would come off a bit better, but it really is like all over the place, and that was really a huge disappointment because none of that, you know, translates across in this performance at all. So, yet again, there's so many things about this movie that don't work, but the things that do are exceptional, and I think the technical aspects of this movie are even stronger than the first. Alice Brooks' cinematography, which was often derided as a bit washed out, so this one they definitely lean into correcting a lot of those mistakes, and also a darker color palette as well, which I think helps, you know, kind of elevate the rest of it. And of course, the production design is amazing. Oz looks great. They really went above and beyond, especially with the witch's castle is amazing. The costumes are also top notch, as you would expect. And so, yeah, there's so many things. And there's a couple moments, though, where this really shines, in the sense that even though narratively speaking it could be stronger in some areas, there are a few techniques with the filmmaking, especially the one number, and one of the new numbers I'll say, where there's this camera technique that's being used and kind of like making you think that a character's in one location, and it's just such great visual trickery that only, you know, the magic of Oz could pull off. And of course Jon M, I gotta give him credit where credit's due. And so I think the camera work, the direction, it's really great overall. And there's this one sequence where there's like cross-cutting between two different locations and characters, which was absolutely sublime. Like one of the most brilliant sequences in both these movies, and one of the best sequences of the year as far as I'm concerned. And so there's so many moments like that that absolutely deliver, and then some. I really love so much of what was accomplished with this film, despite the many misgivings I have with how it was executed. And that's the thing, like I said, this could go down a little bit, or it could stay the same when I see this movie again. But I am giving it the score that I'm giving because I really do think it is such a satisfying conclusion to this narrative, regardless, even if it could have been a bit tighter in spots and more clean and less messy. It is a beautiful mess at that, and just one that I think is going to satisfy fans of the original novel and musical. Maybe not, but you know, for me at least, I really am excited to go back and see it again. So maybe it will stay this way for me. Not one of my favorite movies of the year or whatever, but this is such a spectacular achievement that all of this came together in the way that it did, and I gotta give credit to Jon M and company, and of course Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo for delivering such memorable and iconic performances. Like really, this is going to go down as such a memorable moment in their careers and onwards. So I'm going to give Wicked for Good a very light 7.5 out of 10. You know, this movie, obviously, a lot of people are going to enjoy it, like I said. When it comes to the Oscars, though, I really don't think that this is going to be as big of a juggernaut. I don't even know if Erivo gets nominated, as great as she is. She outshines Grande in quite a few moments, but the thing is, if this is not in picture, I don't know if she gets it again. I think Ariana Grande's coming for another Oscar nomination, though, because she's so strong and that field is a little bit more wide open. But honestly, I only really see this getting, for right now, realistically speaking, supporting actress, costume design, production design, I'd say makeup as well. So, and maybe actress, so, you know, 4 or 5 nominations for the latest Wicked film. Still, I think it's going to have its lovers, and maybe that will translate. We'll have to see how things progress in the next few weeks. But yeah, overall though, let me know what you thought about Wicked for Good down in the comments below. And if you're a fan of the musical, did you love it, or were you let down by this final chapter in the series? Because I know a lot of people in theater also say the second act's a lot weaker. And if you were a big fan of the first one without having much knowledge of the second one, like myself, what did you think about how it all concluded? Let me know that and so much more, and please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. I gotta bring you guys a lot of movie reviews this week. I do want to do the Pokemon video, but like I said, you know, Train Dreams is out. I've seen that twice already. I can't wait to talk about that. Of course, Hamnet is coming out this weekend. Probably one of the biggest movies I still have yet to talk about for this entire year. You got so many movies. I don't even want to get into it because I'm getting overwhelmed just thinking about it. But you guys, look forward to all that and so much more. And I will see you next time.
As it passes, a sound like a stream.